Call to order. Let's all stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. MaryAnn, can you read the statement of certification of the meeting?
The meeting has been advertised according to sunshine law.
Please call the roll.
Chairman Venero,
Here.
Mayor Melham, Mr. Zangari,
Here.
Mr. Conti, Mr. Vanda,
Here.
Mr. Bove, Mr. Corbo, I believe he's muted, but I do see him in.
There he goes.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
I had it on mute.
Mr. Graziano, Ms. Guaman,
Here.
Ms. Rico, Ms. Inaugurato,
Here.
Mr. Guians,
I'm here.
Mr. DiLorenzo, Mr. DiLorenzo just joined. Okay, Mr. Harris
Here.
and Ms. Tavito. Rose. All right, hold on 1 minute.
Just give it us a moment, please.
I'm sorry, I can't get in touch with Rose, the board attorney, so I do not know if we could go further.
Was she confirmed?
Yes, yes. And I just called her back to back. Just give me a second. Okay, Rose, we got you.
Yes.
Okay, great. So she's here and we could continue. Sorry for the delay, guys.
We call the roll, right?
We called the roll, yes, so we could do minutes.
All right, do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes for the September 10th, 2020 meeting.
Make a
I'll
motion.
move it. Second.
Chairman Venero,
Yes.
Mr. Banda,
Yes.
Mr. Bove, Mr. Corbo,
Yes.
Ms. Inaugurato,
Yes.
Mr. Zangari,
Yes.
Ms. Guaman,
Yes.
Mr. Guyen's.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Old business, we have resolutions to be memorialized. First is PB 2911, 695-701 Mill Street, Block 1604, Lot 11, Township of Belleville. It was a minor subdivision, permitted a sitting park on the subdivided portion of the premises. Corinne, please call the roll.
Chairman Venero,
Yes.
Mr. Banda,
Yes.
Mr. Bove, Mr. Corbo,
Yes.
Ms. Guaman,
Yes.
Ms. Inaugurato,
Yes.
Mr. Zangari,
Yes.
Mr. Guyen's.
Yes.
Okay, next up, we have PB 2007, 229 Main Street, Block 2502, Lot 17 and 20, Dorso Realty Group, a minor subdivision to create 3 lots from the 2 existing lots by creating a lot line between a shopping center and commercial structures. Please call the roll.
Mr. Venero,
Yes.
Mr. Banda,
Yes.
Mr. Bove,
Yes.
Mr. Corbo,
Yes.
Ms. Guaman,
Yes.
Ms. Inaugurato,
Yes.
Mr. Zangari,
Yes.
Mr. Guyen's.
Yes.
PB 2008-131-137 Graylock Avenue. We're not going to vote on that tonight as it's not ready. Under new business, we have PB 2014. The planning board is to review and submit recommendations to the mayor and council regarding an ordinance amending Chapter 18 Land Subdivision, Chapter 19 Land Use Procedures, Chapter 20 Site Plan, and Chapter 23 Zoning in the Township of Belleville. MaryAnn is going to present.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Is this the only item that's left on the agenda, or do you have items after this?
This is the only thing on the agenda.
Okay, all right. So I don't have to rush. Let me open my notes and get started. Back in July of 2019, there was a major amendment that was made to the zoning ordinance following the master plan reexamination. There were a lot of changes, and so what ended up happening was that based on those changes, there was a lot of feedback that we got from both the planning board members, from other professionals within the township, from the governing body, and any other community comments that were shared with Frank DiLorenzo and his staff, and of course the planning board subcommittee. So in giving it some time to see how things worked and the changes worked, we basically went back in and now we're coming forward with some adjustments based on the feedback that we received. There is also some minor cleanup items in the ordinance, some things that possibly could have been handled by the clerk during editing, but we thought it would be best if we presented it as part of an amendment, since we're doing this addition of some and cleanup of things anyway. So as I go through these items, what I'll do is go down the list and explain where each one came from and why they're here, and essentially what's accomplished by them. it looks like a lot more than it is, but the reason it does look that way is because the ordinance amendment has to take a certain format and really show what the new change is going to be and show what's being removed and what's being replaced, or at least identify what's being removed and being replaced. So it's tedious looking, but it's not that complicated. So the first change is a change to the threshold for site plan review. And that actually is located within 3 sections. Chapter 23, the land use subdivision. Chapter 29, I think it's 29, land use procedures. And chapter 20, Belleville site plan. So that's not 29, it's, yeah, it's 29. These sections all have the same information in them, and some of the paragraphs were exactly the same, so they were all affected by the change to the threshold. Basically, one of the things that was sought was to not require full site plan approval for tenant changes when the uses are permitted and there's no changes in parking that are required, and possibly even no, signage would still have to, if it was conforming, it would have to go for a variance if it wasn't, but if it was conforming, all of those things would not need a full-blown site plan approval. And so there were changes made to the threshold that would accommodate that. And then there were also changes made to say, if we are going to change that and we're going to not have it go before a full board, we at least have it go before the planning board subcommittee. And so that's what the first set of changes do. It increases the threshold for additions, rehabilitations, and surface disturbance, but what it does is require those to still go before a subcommittee of the planning board. And the subdivision section is in there because currently the way the ordinance reads, there's a subcommittee for subdivisions, which is essentially inactive and really is replaced by the planning board subcommittee that exists now. And the ordinance identifies and formalizes that subcommittee and establishes the membership. So the next section is in the zoning section is word and terms. These are items that from feedback from various governing officials and community people, we're clarifying things that were confusing in the ordinance. And one of them was the definition for bar and tavern. What's the difference? And the bottom line is they are the same. So if that's interchanged in the ordinance, that they are clearly the same. There is a term that was in there for garage repair, which is no longer valid, and that was being deleted. That's one of those editing corrections. The other thing that was cleaned up, I would say, is the definition for dwelling unit. To specifically define duplex, triplex, townhouses, and ensure that they're consistent throughout the ordinance. There were changes to the off-street parking and loading requirements, mostly to address the issue of driveway width. And the old ordinance had a standard width for a driveway, which didn't make sense if there were multiple parking spaces, and the zoning ordinance now permits cars to be stacked along the side yard as in a driveway and count towards the parking requirement. So the amendment institutes a sliding scale based on lot width so that larger lots can accommodate larger driveways, but there's maximums set in there so that it does not affect and remove too many on-street parking spaces. And that was worked out at length with the planning board subcommittee to try and make sure that at least representatives of the subcommittee and the staff, to make sure that that was something that was appropriate for Belleville. Mechanical stackers. A lot of places are starting to get pressure to use them. They're very unattractive. So one of the things that we chose to do here is not to restrict them, because in some cases they may be useful and maybe places where they can be screened and used, but they cannot count towards the minimum parking requirement, which means that they're not going to be, people aren't going to come in with extra large residential projects and try and stick stackers outside in the back and say that we can meet our parking requirement in this way. So this is done to accommodate a different way to park, but it's hopefully will not take away from the residential projects and the quality of the residential projects that you get. Other things are things that I think should have been included or meant to be included and were not in the last amendment. The BA zone and the BG zone particularly were meant to be mixed use projects where people can have active uses on the ground floor and live upstairs. And a lot of times they're the old corner buildings that would normally have either a bar or a tavern or something, or a restaurant downstairs. That was left out of this, and now it is being put back in. Let me see, this is an editing correction, the next one. And the next couple of amendments are editing corrections, just to make sure that the terminology throughout the ordinance says zoning official, and sometimes it was saying construction official, sometimes it said code official, sometimes it said zoning officer, and it was very confusing because it all is all the same person. So we've adjusted the terms so that they're consistent throughout the ordinance. Another editing change is cleaning up the conditional use sections, taking out the actual section for conditional use when there are no conditional uses that are existing in that zone. And this is boring, I'm sorry. I just want to go through the list in case there's any issues or questions. There were, let me see. Okay, some of this was just total editing, just in title only. One major change that was made was the sidewalk cafe. It turns out that the parameters for the sidewalk cafe were too stringent. They weren't realistic. It was impossible to do functional cafes in some of the Belleville streets. So this was adjusted to be 4 feet wide so that it meets handicapped access and still allows for people to walk past the restaurant seating, but allows for a sidewalk cafe. The schedule of district regulations was amended to address a couple of different things, restore standards for uses that weren't permitted in the RC zone, and also clarify some details in the table notes, which apparently there were questions on. So another change was the RC zone district for houses of worship to exempt the spires from those buildings, at least for a certain percentage of the maximum height. There was a major provision that was changed at the last ordinance to prohibit box signs. Box signs are generally the sign that's just a box with the plastic and lighting behind them. They are not the current trend, and the subcommittee wanted to prohibit them, and the board approved that the last time this ordinance was adopted. Apparently that change may have come too quickly for many of the business owners and for many of the new tenants that are coming into Belleville. So the solution is to come in with a sunset date. So they would have, right now, this ordinance would actually states a date where where people are informed that the sign ordinance is going to change. So all the owners know that when a new tenant comes in, they need to inform them that they will not be able to use the existing sign structure, and part of their application or tenancy will involve the cost of a new sign. Whether the owner takes care of that or the tenant, that's up to them. But based on this ordinance, it won't take effect for a year. And so everybody has a year to make whatever arrangements they need to if they currently have one of those old non-conforming signs. Fences were adjusted to essentially go back to the way they were for corner lots. The side yards and front yards and rear yards were redefined for corner lots, and the swimming pool and play equipment setbacks, so things are easier to figure out when you go to build it. There was a change in the VB1 district as well to add retails, grocery stores, and retail shopping centers. Essentially, the shopping center that is down on Main Street is in that zone and would have been non-conforming, and that's not acceptable. So that use is added back in. And then the BG zone was changed to clarify the materials for new residential buildings, make sure that IFAS is prohibited, and commercial building colors was also, a section was added to ensure that there were not some crazy neon colors that would be happening in any of the commercial districts. So commercial buildings rather. And a zoning map change so that the land at the end of Montgomery Street is changed from, looks like let me see, hold on a second, from RC to VB2. And those are a summary of all the changes. I'm sorry that was long, but I wanted to get that on the record. And then I guess the next thing I can do is ask for questions. I'm sure you probably have some, and I hope that you had a lot of time to review this because it was available. It's been available for public review for over 10 days.
MaryAnn, I just had one question under, I guess, page 5 about the parking. It says about the curb cut and driveway, the parking could be up to a half a foot from the side property line. Does that mean a car could park 6 inches from the property line?
Yes. Here's what that, let me just get to the page that you're on. You're on page 6.
5.
Page 5.
The bottom of the page.
Yeah, 0.5 feet. Now that wasn't changed this time around. That was a change that was put in with the last amendment. Apparently, given the size of the lots and some of the applications that have been coming in, this came from the zoning officer. Apparently, there's a lot of old garages and driveways that are located at this distance from the property line. However, they were all considered non-conforming because the prior ordinance had said something like 5 feet or more. I forget exactly what it was. And it was just a burden for a lot of homeowners because it was a minor setback change. It was something that was pre-existing in many instances, so it was removed and replaced with what really was the functional reality.
But this would be for new construction also?
It would be, but this is in residential and it's basically 1 and 2 family districts here. Let me make sure. Let me open it again and make sure. Residential parking requirements in the RA, RB, RC, and PRD districts. Yes.
Wow. I don't know how I'd feel having somebody park 6 inches from my property.
Well, this is basically what exists in a lot of the 1 and 2 family districts. And maybe, I don't know, Frank is in the picture, but maybe he can describe it because I think this came out of a lot of issues with with homeowners and garages. Originally, like I said, what used to happen is there was some type of, I guess they couldn't use the garage. If they weren't going to rehab the garage, they would park in front of the garage, and they wouldn't be able to park in front of the garage because the driveway wouldn't allow it. The other item is the parking requirements were increased in the last ordinance to require 1 space per bedroom for up to 3 bedrooms, and then 0.75 spaces for the 4th bedroom on. And so in order to meet that parking requirement, there had to be parking permitted in the side yard. That's why that was put that way. It doesn't have to stay at 0.5. If you know, now that the whole reason we're doing this is because people have, got back and said, this works, this doesn't work. No one had any issue with that, but that doesn't mean it's, it won't become a problem. If you think that it is, and we could adjust that.
I just wonder how you open your car door. If you're 6 inches, you'd have to open your door into your neighbor's property.
Well,
When
it's
you get
not
out
that the car, it's that the driveway is. I mean, the driveway would still have to be at a width and size where you'd be able to park on it. It's just basically the edge of the asphalt to the property line is the 6 inches. It's the half a foot. That's what that is. It's not saying that the car goes right there. It's basically saying that's where the driveway can go along that side. And if you think we can change it. I mean, a lot of times, many places have between 3 and 5 feet. I would say maybe 3 feet is probably the average that you see. But like I said, this came from a request. This was more of a local community request. And I'm not sure the repercussions if we don't do it, but it's something that's certainly up to the planning board. I mean, this is your town, so it's up to you.
All right, Mr. Di Lorenzo, you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, could you just put your input on that?
Yeah, the thing is, Ray, it's say 6 inches, like MaryAnn said. If you move it, if you're 3 feet, if you have to do 3 feet, then they're going to be parking more into the front of the house. So it'll be into there. So do we want that more parking in front of the house? Like they might land the driveway in front of the living room window.
Yeah.
So that's one of the issues that you run into, And most of the houses now, even though it's pre-existing, the driveways are right to the property line, not even 6 inches. Pre-existing ones that were built 20, 30, 40 years ago, whatever.
Okay.
You follow me? If you drive around,
yes.
you'll see them there. And MaryAnn's right. That's just 6 inches. They're not going to park right there. They're going to still have the space. It's just that it won't be in front of the house, more or less.
Okay, thank you.
If you understand what I'm saying, right?
Yes, yep, I follow you.
Good.
Any other members have any questions for MaryAnn?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
You talked about the signs on the stores. Were you talking about the LED different color lights that a lot of store owners are putting around?
I wasn't. Those are already prohibited. Somewhere, they're not part of this change. They were prohibited in the last amendment.
So no store should have them.
Those LED signs, they shouldn't. If they go up and you see them, I guess you can give Frank a call. Those would be a violation of the ordinance.
Unless it was pre-existing, legal pre-existing,
Yes, unless
legal
it's
non-conforming.
All right, so we have plenty of them around town. Thank you.
Any other members have questions? If no other members have questions, MaryAnn, is there anything else you want to sum up with, or?
I don't have to sum up. I hate to take your time. What I think that this is a good exercise, going back and forth and trying out some of the amendments, seeing how they go and making adjustments. And I feel that, even though these seem like very nitpicky changes, they're based on real life experiences and putting the ordinance to the test. So I think that that these are, will be a good thing for Belleville to implement. And that's not to say that, you might get more feedback, but I think we gave it enough time to try it out. And I think that these will be a good step forward.
Okay, just one question. Should we form another subcommittee for any future site plan approvals?
Yeah, I think so, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I would like to suggest our town officials, Mr. DiLorenzo and Mr. Harretts. I would like to be on a subcommittee, and Mr. Banda, would you like to be part of the subcommittee?
Yeah, thank you. It'd be my pleasure. I'd be happy to.
All right, great. So we have our 4 members, and in the future, if there's any site plan approval that needs a subcommittee, we have our members, and we will hear it.
Okay, I don't have it in front of me because but I actually think that you might be able to have one more planning board member.
That's 3, right? 3, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to have an odd one, right, Mayor?
Yeah, it's in here. So it would be the applicant planning board subcommittee consisting of the zoning official, the township engineer, the planning board chairman, or a planning board member designated by the chairman, and 1 class 4 member of the planning board. So actually that is it. That's the subcommittee. Now we could adjust that now if you want to add another member, or you want to add 3 members. I mean, basically it gets unwieldy and it gets hard to put meetings together if you have too many people. But this is the chairman and another member, and then two of the township professionals. And that's how it's organized.
All right, I'd like to appoint Mr. Andy Conti too, our vice chairman, to the subcommittee.
Okay, so what I will do is adjust this to include 2, make this say 2 members, 2 class 4 members.
And the chairman, yep.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
Okay, if no one has any more questions or comments, does anyone want to make a motion for the approval of this ordinance, that we move it forward to the mayor and council?
Motion.
Wait, guys, you, this is a question for Rose.
Recommendation, right, Mayor?
It is a recommendation. You may need to check with Rose. You may need to have public comment.
Oh,
You should have public comment. You should,
yes,
put it on the record.
forgot about that. Is there anybody in the public that has a question or comment before we move forward?
No?
So hearing none, you can, do your motion.
Yes, so we have the motion and a second to submit a recommendation to the mayor and council for the ordinance with the amendments.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Corinne, could you call the roll?
Chairman Venero,
Yes.
Mr. Banda,
Yes.
Mr. Bove,
Yes.
Mr. Corbo,
Yes.
Ms. Guaman,
Yes.
Ms. Inaugurato,
Yes,
Mr. Zangari,
Yes.
Mr. Guyen's.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We have nothing further. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Make a motion.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Bove. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
thank you all. Joy.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right.